Hey, I wouldn't waste that.
Waste what?
No. Never, ever, never, ever, 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 never drink your own urine. Everything that's in urine is what your body does not want in it. And you're going to put it back in? Completely stupid. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters and the Pathfinder School in Southeast Ohio. I'm also a New York Times best-selling author of Bushcraft 101. And today, we're going to react to some really cool survival clips. So stay with me because we're going to have some fun. This gentleman was stuck in one place and could not move. Therefore, his panic was all had to happen right there. And that's a lot of times what causes people to get lost to begin with is they panic for an emergency and they start running around like crazy and all of a sudden they're lost. Avoid panic is one of the top things as far as psychological survival goes that you need to remember. When you start to panic, especially if you already have a breathing problem, it's only going to get worse. On the multi-tool itself, he wasn't even using the knife blade to do the cutting. He was using a screwdriver. Is this a feasible situation to happen? It probably is. I would say that he's very lucky that he didn't either die of shock or die from bleeding out. He started to cut into himself prior to applying a tourniquet. If you're going to make a deep cut like that into your arm where there's possibly going to be arterial bleeding, a tourniquet would be absolutely critical to keep you from bleeding out. And when you're in that kind of pain in that situation, the chances of you passing out from shock are pretty high. That's intense, for sure. Most of that could have been avoided with one simple device called a personal locator beacon. You hit the button, people know that you're in trouble, you're probably going to be rescued, or someone's going to come and help you within 24 hours because it sends out a satellite beacon that will show people exactly where you are. Because it's a true story, it's obviously 100% accurate. Whether it was 100% accurately portrayed is another story. So at the Pathfinder School in Southeast Ohio, one of the things that we teach is what I call the 5 C's. These are the things you should have with you to immediately affect your survivability. And those 5 C's are, number 1, cutting tools. Number 2, combustion devices. Number 3, clothing and cover. Number 4, containers. And number 5, cordage. Very famous historical event, Hugh Glass being attacked and eventually killing a grizzly bear. How historically accurate it is, again, is hard to say because it was probably created from journals. Obviously, it's a movie, so a maximum drama applies. In a situation like that, obviously, if you get between a bear cub and the mother, you've already got a problem. The problem with an attack like that in the wild, he lays up in the woods for a long period of time healing up. In a wet, damp environment like that, things like sepsis, things like infection, especially in deep wounds, areas of the throat where you could hit a jugular vein and possibly bleed out, things like that would be much more traumatic probably than they were portrayed in the movie. I think that he probably would have been better off in reality had he not shot the bear. He was already attacked. The bear had left, walked off, collected its cub, probably would have walked by him and assumed he was dead and no longer a threat and kept on going. Instead, he shot the bear and provoked it to attack a second time. So obviously this being a true story, it's 100% historically accurate. I would probably give this about a 40% accuracy rating in reality because an attack that severe with injuries to the throat close to the jugular vein probably would have made him bleed out. And if not, he probably would have died from some type of infection very soon after. People in the United States are not as frightened of bears as people are where grizzly bears are prevalent in the north, in Alaska, places like that. But any bear can be dangerous, especially when you get between a mother and the cubs, because that's just instinct, no different than a mother and a child. So avoiding bears is always going to be your best option. Oh, the one where he slept inside the carcass? Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know about all that. Obviously in this scene, freezing to death, he's trying to use the internal body heat from the horse to warm his body and spend a night in the wilderness. But there are things that are very dangerous about what he did. It would take a heck of a knife to cut the rib cage of a horse open without batoning that knife or using some type of an axe or a saw. And then once you opened it up to crawl inside, you'd have jagged edges of bone that you've taken all your clothes off. You have no protection from, that you're trying to squeeze between, which is probably going to cause abrasions at the least, cuts at the most, that could cause you more problems and more disease in the future. Now you've got a giant gut pile laying out in the snow, and it's going to attract those predators to the area, which you don't see in this clip, and which probably would have happened in reality. If not bears, definitely wolves. While this animal's warm immediately after it's been gutted and died, it's only going to stay warm for a certain amount of time. In that kind of temperature, below freezing, you're probably talking about a few hours, not an overnight situation where you're going to stay warm inside. Is he protected from the weather? Yes. He's not going to get snow, not going to get the wind, but that body of that horse is going to cool down dramatically over hours of time, and he could just end up frozen inside the body. I would give this probably 40% accuracy again. Is that feasible? In the short term, it probably is, given the correct equipment and given the correct situation.
Hedisarum alpinum.
He's foraging for food, and he picks a poisonous plant. It could happen to anyone in a situation like this. If you're trying to forage for food, you should take the safest option to you first. With plants, it's so important to never put a plant in your mouth that you're not 100% sure is going to be safe to eat. So the mistake he makes right off the bat is, you can see when he's back in his bus, he has 2 points of reference. He has 2 books. When he's collecting this plant, he's only using one. So unless you're absolutely sure about a plant's edibility, you never use a single reference. So there's a gentleman on YouTube named Green Dean, and he's got a very good reference that is an acronym for harvesting medicinal and edible wild plants, and it's called ITEM. So I stands for identifying the plant thoroughly with multiple references. T stands for the correct time of year that plant should be blooming or growing. E stands for the environment that plant is growing in, and M stands for the proper method of harvest and preparation. Because some plants can be poisonous if eaten raw, but can be non-poisonous once they're cooked, and vice versa. Eventually, true story, he ended up dying. Accuracy of this scene, probably 100%. Mistakes get made when you're tired, when you're hungry, when you're pissed off, and those mistakes can lead to death.
I got an idea. Let's dig a hole.
A hole.
Yeah. Walk out of here, get to civilization. Drive back, pick it up. Work smarter, not harder.
You'll never find it.
No, I will. Is I'll memorize the landmarks.
One of them is talking about leaving, probably going to find help, and using landscape markers to find his way back. Is that feasible? 100% it is feasible. However, you're talking about a desert that looks fairly sparse. Those landmarks are probably very far apart, and they could look completely different from the time you see it to the time you get to it. Very important to understand. Navigation in the desert is not an easy thing. The one thing I saw that was very accurate is that the person who's talking about leaving is layered up with clothing, control his body core temperature, and keep the sun off of his skin directly, and that creating those layers actually will keep him cooler in the long run.
I'd go easy on that.
At the next level, they're trying to use what's called a transpiration device to collect water because they don't have enough water. Now, the feasibility of a transpiration device is 100%. How much water it gives you depends on how much green vegetation you can use in that transpiration pit. And it also depends on how much of a greenhouse you can affect by putting a cover over it. Clear plastic is always, 100% of the time, going to work better for transpiration than anything else because it creates that greenhouse effect. Black not so much.
I got 2 of these. You want one?
Space blankets at night, good idea. Control body core temperature, trap heat. That's what you want to do because it can get a lot colder in the desert at night than it is during the day. Analyzing this clip as far as accuracy goes, I'd probably give it 50-50. You could not pay me enough money to go to the desert and live. I hate the desert. I have no use for the desert. There's no water. There's no plants. There's no trees. Done. Full stop. I'm not going. He washes up on the beach, obviously, and now he understands he's marooned. The first thing he does is he starts to pick up packages that are from the wreckage. And in a real life situation, one of the first things you'd want to do is you'd want to collect any debris that you could find that may be usable to you. Normally speaking, you can go 3 days-ish without consuming good potable water before your body starts to malfunction. You cannot drink seawater. There's too much saline content in it. So in his situation, I'd say his first priority is to find fresh water. Otherwise, he's going to die or suffer from dehydration. There are desalination devices. You put the salt water inside of a container and you boil that water and you trap the steam in a pipe. And when that steam turns back into water, the salt stays in the bottom container and you get distilled water. That's a completely different problem altogether because distilled water has no vitamins, no minerals, no saline. So now you've got to combine that with other sources of electrolytes. Adding a little bit of seawater to that to make it a little bit saline definitely would not be a bad thing at all. You just can't drink that salt water straight. Wilson. How does a FedEx worker even understand to try to make a friction fire with a fire plow? You have to understand that a fire plow is not something that you would just think of doing because you just happen to know or somebody told you as a FedEx worker. If you look at the actual movie in context, washed up on the beach and immediately he sees he's got a beeper. So now you know this is probably 80s time frame. In that period, if you looked at any book like a survival manual, a military manual, a scout manual of any kind, some kind of a woodcraft manual written by any of the authors of the period, most of them talk about bow drill fires. So that would be the most prevalent known form of friction fire other than flint and steel, which is actually percussion fire, that most people would have knowledge of or had seen before. Generally speaking, with a fire plow, the stick is never split. It's a trough that you're running a softer piece of wood into, or a harder piece of wood than the trough itself, which is perfectly feasible. That could be done on an island. Palm trees in general are good for friction fire. The second problem is the speed. The speed is slow at first to build the dust, and then very, very fast to create heat from speed and friction to ignite the tinder. Tinder generally doesn't explode into flame. It generally smokes a lot and turns into what's called an ember. And then you need to put that into something larger. Now, if you blow on it, will it ignite? Yes, but it's very short-lived. And it's called a flash tinder. It goes up, it goes out.
Yeah! Look what I have created! I have made fire!
After the fact, would he have celebrated making fire? He absolutely would have. There's lots and lots of things, including cooking food and preserving food, he can now do that he has fire. However, he's never going to want to make that same friction fire again. So I'd give it again about 50-50 as far as accuracy goes. It's a very horrific scene. Obviously, plane crashes and surviving a plane crash is a very horrific thing.
So let's make room inside the plane. Let's take out all the seats so we can all fit in there. So let's clean up the side of the plane. That's where the sun is. We'll take anyone who's hurt over there and help them as much as we can.
Eating snow in an already cold situation is doing nothing but putting more cold inside of a hot body and dropping your body's core temperature even worse than it already is. So you never want to eat snow or ice. So they had no way to melt that snow. That's a problem. They did say that they were moving injured people to the sunny side of the plane. That tends to make me believe that they could have melted snow somehow, possibly, inside the plane if they could trap enough heat in one of the windows with a container to melt some water. No one in this scene seems to have much survival knowledge, which is very important to understand. Context is everything. And in the context of this, there's no real survival knowledge. There is good awareness of, let's take care of these people this way, let's put these people here. However, what's very difficult to understand in this scenario is just being inside that plane, the only thing you're really going to have is body heat. So pig piling is going to be the key to that, and keeping everybody warm as you possibly can. I couldn't tell if he was pissing in the snow, brown or red. Brown is dehydration, red means he's got internal bleeding. If it was brown, it's dehydration. That's hard to fathom when you're surrounded by snow. In a survival scenario, there's three main concepts that you need to understand. Don't bleed out, don't get too hot, don't get too cold. If you can address those three issues, you're in pretty good shape. Hydration plays directly into your ability to control your body's core temperature.
From evil, amen. On earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us.
They become cannibalistic in the end. Not the first time in history it's ever happened. Historically, cannibalism has always been a thing. They're not in the movie making potable water. If you eat meat that contains protein, your body has to have water to metabolize that protein. So if you're already dehydrated, the last thing you want to do is eat. In the end, if you're facing starvation and you have meat or you have food, what are you going to do? What would I do? I can't say what I would do, but I can tell you one thing: what I wouldn't do is starve to death. So I would give this probably 80 to 90% accuracy. It is, again, a true story.
Can you move it?
Yeah. Here, come on. Okay.
So the gentleman's limb is trapped underneath a plane wreckage, and when they lift the wreckage off, there's obviously bone exposed, too much damage to the leg. In a survival scenario from a medical standpoint, and I'm not a doctor, so I'm not giving any medical advice here, once that wreckage was moved from his leg, which may have been the first mistake, immediately this person would be bleeding out. I doubt seriously that someone of that age would have the thought process immediately in an emergency scenario like that to walk over, grab a tool like an axe or something, and cut someone's leg off immediately. No tourniquet before the amputation. You have to put a tourniquet above the knee, above the nearest joint, restrict any blood flow immediately before you even lifted that plane off, and then definitely before the amputation. When she applied a tourniquet after the fact, which she shouldn't have, all she basically did was tied in a half of a bow knot, just an overhand half hitch, and yanked it tight, which in no way, shape, or form would have worked. It would have needed to be fed through the buckle of the belt, tightened down, and compressed the arteries against the bone for that to have worked to stop the bleeding. If you understand that the leg is trapped underneath there, it's already bleeding, and you know you're going to have to amputate that leg anyway, doing it while it's still under the wreckage, everything's compressed, and you can just put a tourniquet behind that before the amputation, probably would have been the best bet. The next thing, probably in my mind, had that been real, would have been immediate cauterization of that wound because they had fire. That's going to stop the bleeding without question. I have to admit, it's not my favorite show. I watched it with my wife, but I think that most of it is very unfeasible to begin with. So like this clip, there's about 0% accuracy in 99% of it.
Who will have what it takes to outwit,
Outplay.
outplay, and outlast?
She actually makes a tool, which I think that part was unnecessary. You could break those branches off. Those fronds could be broken. They don't need to be cut. The water collection was phenomenal. I think I would have tried to find some bigger containers than that, but obviously she didn't have them, so she had to use half coconuts. The one thing that they didn't show how she got those coconut shells, because that's a lot harder than you think it is. She didn't do that with a rock, I can promise you that. Them things were clean cut, perfect half circles, and she did not do that with a rock. Them things were saw cut. So harvesting coconuts, getting all the coconut meat out of the inside, and having a clean half shell like that, that would be way more difficult than what it looks like it was in the show. The bamboo fire saw is an absolute feasible skill. The bamboo has to be split and you use the rib edge of one side for friction against another piece that is in the round with a slit to create heat and friction to make an ember. She used the entire round and both sides with a slit in the middle, which means there's nothing contacting that area where the tinder's at whatsoever. I would give it, 80% accurate as far as what you would need to do and how you would go about doing it. But because of the whole bamboo fire saw scene, I have to drop that down to probably 60, 70% accurate. Am I convinced that she saw any of this on Survivor? Not necessarily. I've only watched a few episodes of Survivor, but I've never seen anything like that. It's not really about survival in the theory of building shelter, making fire, collecting water. It's more of a social environment, not a single person survival event.